Hang on. No! No! What is going on, guys? So today we're back with another deep dive, and today we're actually going over a quite interesting Pokemon. I always love talking about Skuntank because he has such an interesting little package already, and anytime that he has the chance to excel in a cup is always pretty great to see. So Skuntank is going to be a dark and poison type Pokemon, maxing out at 2358, but with a 0 on attack, 15 defense, and 15 stamina. At 24 you can hit 1495, which does actually yield us the highest stat product available in the Great League. Now if you actually compare Skuntank up against the entire Ferocious Cup in terms of bulk and stat product, we actually rank 36th in bulk, which is decent, and then 33rd in stat product, which is just a tad bit better. So it's not like groundbreaking high or anything like that, but it is okay. Now of course all those numbers do derive from our base stats with a 184 on attack, 132 defense, and a whopping 230 on the stamina. It's a decent little package. I wish attack and defense were switched, but you know, it's whatever. Now, of course, moving on to our moves, we do have a couple of different fast moves that are quite interesting, and I was actually surprised at which one actually performs better in this cup, but you know, we'll talk about that here in a minute. We do have Poison Jab and Bite in our fast moves with 3.5 energy for Poison Jab at 3 damage, which does get boosted up to 3.6 after Stab. Then we do have Bite for a whopping 2 energy, kind of low, for a whopping 4 damage. After Stab, it does get bumped up to 4.8, which is even better. So definitely looking good in terms of our 2 fast moves. Honestly, I'm gonna wait to talk about which one we're gonna go with because we need to get a whole picture before we see this. So in terms of our charge moves, we do have Crunch, Flamethrower, and Sludge Bomb. Crunch actually coming in at 45 energy to fire for 70 damage at a 1.56. After Stab, it does get bumped up to 84 for a whopping 1.87. Then we have Flamethrower for 55, we get 90 damage at a 1.64. And Sludge Bomb for 50 energy, we get 80 damage at a 1.6. But after Stab, it does get bumped up to 96 on the damage for a 1.92 on the damage per energy ratio. So now that we've talked about all of our moves, let's actually talk about this little package. So for what it's worth, the moveset that we're going to go with in this video actually isn't the best performing moveset for Skuntank up against the meta in the Ferocious Cup. Now I know what you're saying, that's a little dumb, why would we do that? Well, the best performing moveset that I found, the only matchup that actually ends up helping it is in the mirror match. And it's kind of a weird situation. When we took a look at Donphan, we actually compared Counter and Charm. Now, I get that there are more options and, you know, certain people want to run certain things, but I definitely feel like you can boil something down to the best moveset possible. It might be situation based, like it's the best move set up against the cup, it's the best move set up against the meta, it's the best move set up against a specific typing. You can always min-max up against anything that you want to. And when I min-max, I want to min-max for the meta because that's what we're going to encounter the most. But in this situation, the one Pokemon that we're going to beat is the mirror match. So we're basically going to beat Skuntank better. And what we actually give up for that is a lot closer matchups in a lot more areas. There were several matchups that we actually went into where we didn't necessarily do as good as we would have with the preferred moveset. So what we're actually going to do today, we're actually going to go with Poison Jab, Crunch, and Sludge Bomb. For what it's worth, if you actually go with Flamethrower instead of Sludge Bomb, you will actually beat the mirror match. But you do actually get a reduced performance, I guess is the word I want to say here, up against quite a few of the other matchups inside the meta. So be wary. If you are expecting a ton of Skuntanks, or for whatever reason you just really want to win that mirror match, definitely, you know, consider going Flamethrower and Crunch. But otherwise, I highly suggest that you keep the matchups as strong as possible outside of the mirror match and go with Poison Jab, Crunch, and Sludge Bomb. Okay? That's just all I'm gonna say. So now let's actually move into those shield scenarios and take a look at what we've got. Up against the entire cup, we do have a 54.2%, which is pretty nice in that 0 versus 0. At least a 50% is what I like to see. In the 2 versus 0, we do have a 99%, which is great. In the 0 versus 2 though, a 1. We have a 1%. which is not great at all. But in the 2 versus 2, we do kind of bring it back with a 46.9. Unfortunately, it's not quite that 50% that we'd like to see, so Skuntank actually performs really well in the no shield scenarios. So basically, whenever we are up against the wall and we don't have anywhere else to go, and we really just need to finish this match, Skuntank might be your man for that. Now let's actually move on to the meta though, where it actually flips a little bit. So in the 0 versus 0, we only have a 24%, which is rough. That's actually rough. That's less than half of what I would expect in an even shield scenario. Next, in the 1 versus 0 though, we do have an 88%, which is very respectable, pretty average. But in the 0 versus 1, it's a 0%. We don't win a single matchup with Skuntank. That is a rough goose egg to see there. And then lastly, in the 1 versus 1, we actually have a 40%, which for what it's worth, it's better than our 0 versus 0. So up against the entire cup, as a generalist, you do better with, you know, no shields. You just kind of want to run it up against the wall. But in the meta though, Skuntank does like his shields pretty well. So it kind of paints an awkward picture already for Skuntank, which it just doesn't sit well with me. So let's actually tear down that 1 versus 1 shield scenario and see which Pokemon we actually do win up against versus the ones that we do lose. So up against the wins, we do have Bibarel, Ferret, Lickitung, Delcatty, Shelgon, Alolan Marowak, Alolan Ninetales, Granbull, Raichu, and Raikou. As far as our losses though, we do have Donphan with Charm, Alolan Raticate, and Skuntank as ties with Torkoal, Minun, Umbreon, Vaporeon, Donphan with Counter, Suicune, Pachirisu, Nidoking, Nidoqueen, Alolan Sandslash, Lairon, and Piloswine as our losses. So if we actually take a look at some of these losses here, these are pretty hard to swallow. If we just take a look at the bottom section here, so Alolan Sandslash, Lairon, Piloswine, Nidoqueen, and even Nidoking, these are pretty rough. And it honestly comes down to the fact that our moveset is just not necessarily tailored to do well up against these types of Pokemon. What do they all have in common? Some way to really deal at least some damage to us with super effective moves, or to completely resist a ton of our damage and output neutral damage to us. So like Nidoking and Nidoqueen basically have some ground type moves, which are the only weakness that we carry as a dark and poison type Pokemon. Alolan Sandslash and Lairon though can just pretty much resist a ton of our damage, which give us a huge setback right out of the gate with Poison Jab. And then Piloswine is kind of in both scenarios where he has ground type moves and he's just able to basically outpace us really well. So let's actually talk about the ripe and rotten Pokemon that we are talking about running with Skuntank versus the ones that we want to completely avoid with Skuntank. If we talk about the ones that we want to avoid, we really do want to avoid Lairon, Piloswine, Nidoqueen, and Nidoking. Those are the biggest ones that we have a ton of trouble with for reasons that I just explained. So how do we really counter those? Well, if we can pair our Skuntank with something like Donphan with Counter, it'll really help up against the Steel and the Ice type Pokemon that give us a ton of trouble. Alolan Marowak is also a decent option here, as it'll actually help us up against the Steel and the Ice type Pokemon there as well. Lairon is actually a decent pick here because Lairon can actually help just spam a ton of damage towards the Ice type Pokemon and really help us out there. Those are kind of in an awkward like downgrading scale though. Like I definitely think that Donphan with Counter is the better option here. Alolan Marowak is a decent option if you already have Donphan with Counter maybe, or you just can't get one. And then Lairon is probably the worst out of the 3 options, but still a very viable option. Piloswine and Vaporeon also could be decent here because they actually both can help take care of the ground type Pokemon that we're worried about. Nidoking and Nidoqueen definitely give us some issues when we go up against them, so we definitely want to have something to help us take those out. A water type fast move or an ice type fast move definitely do make a world of difference here, and especially if you can secure those with water type or ice type charge moves, it definitely makes things easier. So Piloswine and Vaporeon, and even Suicune for that matter, can definitely actually help a ton here. Suicune is a little bit more awkward here because you would have to rely more on your charge moves, since we did find out that basically we want to run Snarl in terms of our fast moves, so kind of does make it a little bit awkward, but for what it's worth, those would actually be decent pairs with Skuntank. So that's actually going to be it for Skuntank, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. As always, remember that if you are interested in voting for the next deep dive, jump down into the description. There is a Discord link there. You can join and vote for any Pokemon that you want to. There's literally a channel called Deep Dive Votes, and you just do your thing. So that is actually going to be it. Thank you guys for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. I'm going to go ahead and head out and see. Thank you guys so much for watching. Always remember that if you like to like videos, you could do that, but if you don't, you could be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in the comments below about the video. I do highly appreciate you guys watching. If you guys want to support me in any way, there are several links down in the description for Patreon, joining the community here on YouTube, or even just directly PayPal if that's your thing. I greatly appreciate everyone's name that's on screen, as you guys have showed some sort of support outside of just viewing the videos, and I thank you guys. You don't understand from the bottom of my heart. So until our next video, guys, I will catch you then.